Hi, my name is Ben, and I'm actually going to be doing a video today for my friend Renee, who asked me to talk about my past and my learning disabilities so it might help future teachers and students going forward. Um, don't really have a whole lot to say, just that I've always been this way. People have asked me in the past, what's it like to be dyslexic, and I tell them I don't really know what it's like not to be dyslexic. I'm a very slow reader, and my reading comprehension is also slower, but I make up for that in perseverance, and I work really hard, and I have my whole life. Um, One of the first times I can really remember having a really tough time was my early education. My first grade through third grade experience was horrible, and in third grade, that's when, at the time, we learned to read. And I had a very bad teacher who just had a lot of emotional problems with herself and just kind of put that onto the students. So I remember one day in class, we were reading Christopher Columbus, and each kid would stand up in front of the class and read a chapter or a page of the book. And it was my turn to stand up in front of the class and read, and I couldn't read. And the teacher at the time thought that I was kidding, and I was looking at the page. At the time, we were also having spelling tests, and I could memorize how to spell, but I couldn't read the words. So again, I was at the front of the class, and I was reading to the class, and or lack thereof, I wasn't reading. And the teacher started to get really upset, told me to go out in the hall, and so I went out in the hall, and then she proceeded to berate me out in the hall. And at the time in the third grade, it was a very large classroom. It was separated by bookshelves, and the hallways were partitioned. So it was basically a whole open concept room, with probably a couple hundred kids in there. And so everybody could hear everything. And so when she took me out into the hallway, she yelled at me and she told me I was a baby and how come I wasn't trying and all this stuff. And then she told me to go to the principal. And then when I got to the principal's office, luckily the principal understood that, this wasn't something I was kidding around with, that I was, obviously upset about it. I think I was crying and all that stuff. So it's just it's just one of those things you got to get through. And luckily, the principal said, okay, obviously this kid's having more issues than we can see. And I went to get tested, and it turns out I have learning disability, dyslexic and ADD and all that good stuff. But it's the kind of thing that, as a kid, it's really difficult because you're different, but you're not different, right? You're the same as the kid next to you. You look the same, you smell the same, you do the same things, but there's something that's fundamentally different. And I think growing up with a learning disability and in being a child, you don't understand what that difference is. So it's like if you had one arm, you'd be like, oh, okay, well, I got an arm, I can see the difference. But it's really tough when you're a kid because you happen to really just don't understand what's wrong with you. And you take that internally, and it really, can hurt you for a long time. It really, you have a poor sense of self, things like that. Luckily, after the third grade, after that terrible experience, I went on to go to Carroll School, which specialized in learning disabilities. And then after that, I went to a high school called Foreman, which also specialized in learning disabilities. And those two schools really helped me out. They had outward bound programs. They did a lot to help you not only do better scholastically, but also mentally. I think a lot of kids are touched by that. And I think even adults at this point, I know for me in my life, I don't get held up by the fact I'm learning disabled, but there are certain situations like, we have to read out loud or things like that, and nobody likes to do that, but especially, the slow kid. So, but one thing that I've always taken with me is that I've always had to work harder. I've known that, and I always have. And that's really what you have to do. You just have to, whenever my teachers, would say to me, like I remember in college, I took accounting class. It killed me. And I just didn't have the mind for it. And I got through it, but I remember my teacher kept on saying, you know what, Ben, I think you should maybe we should fail you, and we'll maybe take it again the next year so it doesn't hurt your GPA. And I'm like, no, I don't want to take this again. I don't care if I get a D. I just don't want to take it again. And every time she'd say that to me, she, it would make me not mad at her, but it would, who are you talking to? Like, I'll show you. I'll get this done. And sure enough, she gave me a D, and she did it because she knew I didn't want to do it again, and she knew how hard I worked. So it was good. Um, when I went to college, I went to a mainstream college. I didn't go to a learning disability school like Carroll or Foreman. I had tutors in almost every subject, and I had one tutor that helped me with all my subjects, reading and writing and all that good stuff. Excuse me, I have a cold. And again, you just learn to get through these things. As a kid, hold on.